Today we're going to make a warm lentil salad. This recipe will be ready in about 20 minutes and makes about 4 servings. So to chop a carrot, I have a peeled carrot here. I'm going to cut the top off and the bottom, something right here. So I'm just going to cut that bit off. Carrots, if they have a really heavy taper, some of them they're kind of fat at the top and they're skinny at the bottom. If you have that, you're going to want to separate those two sides and chop them separately, because obviously you're going to get a lot more carrot out of the top than the bottom. In this case, this carrot is not real tapered, so I'm just going to cut it in half. And to make a good chop with a skinny carrot like this, we're just going to cut it in half. And we'll cut it in half again. So the pieces are going to be roughly the same size. Anytime you're cooking vegetables, you want the pieces to be roughly the same size so that they cook at the same rate. The next thing we're going to chop is an onion. For this recipe, we're going to use a regular yellow onion, but you could use any kind of onion you have. To chop an onion, let's look at the onion first. You've got a root end, has the roots coming out of it, and this is the blossom end. So this is where the plant would come out of, because an onion is a bulb. The way to cut an onion, we're going to cut the blossom end off. You're going to take this cut end, you're going to put it down on your cutting board, and you're going to put your knife right in the center of the root end. Very carefully and with a sharp knife, cut the bulb in half. And everything's being held together by this root end. If you look at the onion, you'll see that there is this piece here that holds all of the layers together. If you cut this off, all of your layers are going to be sliding everywhere and you won't be able to cut it as easily. So we're going to come back up here and we're going to begin peeling this papery skin off. So the way to make a chopped onion is, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our knife. You're going to point the flat end, the end you cut off, toward your body, the root end away from you, and you're going to begin slicing into the onion. And your knife isn't going to go all the way through. See, I've got my tip of my knife here. I don't want to cut all the way through to that root end. So I've got sort of a fan cut going on. I could do one of two things here. I can just go ahead and chop, or you can take a slice or two through that end of the onion that will give you some further cuts. What you're going to want to do now, again, have this root end holding everything together, but you want to kind of brace the onion with your fingers and then start cutting across the front. And then you have these chopped onions. And then you have this bit of the root end, and you can just throw this away. Some of these pieces are a little bigger because I didn't make several cuts into the front of the onion. If I wanted, really more precise cuts, I could have done 1, 2, 3, 4 cuts. The finer you want your chop, the closer together your knife cuts are going to be. The next thing we're going to prep is the garlic. When you're shopping for garlic, what you want to look for is garlic heads that have large, heavy cloves on the outside. You don't want a garlic head that has a bunch of little cloves, and you can tell that by running your finger over it. So we separate the cloves from the head just by peeling them off. On the clove, you're going to find a root end, just like on the onion, and it's kind of this hard, woody sort of end on the clove. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to cut that off. They're kind of hard and woody, and I don't like the texture that they have. The best way to get a skin off, there are all kinds of gadgets that'll do that for you. There's garlic rollers that'll take the peel off. I just do it the old-fashioned way. I just take my knife, put it on top, whack it, and it crushes the garlic, which is fine because we're going to mince it anyway. To mince them, just kind of run your knife through it lengthwise, and you have kind of this sliced garlic. And then I'm just going to kind of come up here. Okay, so you're going to have a pile like this. You can take your knife hold the tip down on your cutting board. Alternately, if you have a grater, a very fine grater, that can be a very easy way. Although it doesn't really chop the garlic, it really sort of almost purees it, but that's fine too because that would work in this dish. Finally, we're going to chop some parsley. Parsley or fresh herbs are optional in this recipe, but it really does give it a nice pop and color. We're using a fresh flat leaf parsley. You could use any other kind of herb that you like. Basil works nice, oregano, thyme works really well. Herbs that have green ends, the flavor is a lot stronger in the stems than it is the leaves, and it can be a little bit overpowering depending on what you're tasting, what dish you're putting it in. So for this recipe, I'm actually going to take the stems off, and I'm just going to do that by twisting the stems off so we have mostly leaves. Super easy way to cut fresh herbs like parsley is to take the bunch in your hand, fold it in half so you have kind of a tight bundle, put it on your cutting board, and just begin to make really close cuts. But you can see that I'm very, very slowly moving my hands backwards as we come through this pile. And then we're gonna just go this way. So same thing, hold the tip of the knife down on the board, just come down like that. So now that we have all of our vegetables prepped, we're gonna start in a large skillet, and we're gonna put in that's about a tablespoon or so. This is olive oil, but you can use any kind of oil that you have. And we're gonna let this oil get nice and warm. So we're gonna add our onion, and then we're gonna use carrots. We have 2 carrots in this recipe. I'm going to toss the vegetables around, and I'm gonna get them coated in the oil. When I have vegetables that have lots of water in them, but I've coated them with oil, they're actually able to heat to a higher temperature and cook faster. All right, so we've gotten to the point where our onions are nice and soft. They're beginning to become translucent, which is where we want to be. The next thing we're going to add in is our garlic. Garlic should generally not be added with onions because it cooks much more quickly, and burned garlic is not a great flavor. Garlic should only be cooked until you can smell it. We're going to add some dried thyme. Thyme is a really nice flavor. It's kind of a lemony sort of flavor, and it pairs really well with lentils. Next, we're going to add in our cooked lentils. These are pre-cooked lentils. Lentils, you don't find them canned too often. Generally, you find them dry, and they cook very easily. Just put them in a pan with water, cook for about 25 to 30 minutes until they're really tender, and you're good to go. So I added 2 cups of cooked lentils into the pan, and I'm going to add a half tablespoon of vinegar. I'm using apple cider, but you could use any kind of vinegar you like. I'm going to stir that up. And then we're going to add a little bit of Dijon mustard. So if you just have plain yellow mustard, that's totally okay. It has kind of a sharp bite to it, which tastes really good in this dish. I'm going to turn the heat off, and I'm just going to make sure that Dijon is mixed really well because nobody wants a mouthful of just mustard. And then we're going to take our fresh herbs. We're going to use our parsley. I'm going to add a pinch of salt, pinch of pepper. I can add more if I need to. And then I'm going to toss that around. If you're using fresh herbs, the time that you want to put them in is after you've turned off the heat, because then they release their flavor. If you cook them, they'll lose their flavor and turn sort of a dull olive color. And that is our warm lentil salad.